Hello YouTube, and I guess we'll make this a throwback Thursday just because of the nature of these 80s movies that we're watching during the COVID shut-in. So, I got 5 things to discuss today. The first 3 are all 80s movies that I watched with James to kind of let him know what all the 80s movies are about, so we're continuing along with that theme. So, to get started, the first one we watched, this was a favorite of mine as a kid. Released sometime in the mid-80s, I think it was. Anyways, it doesn't really say here anywhere that I can tell. But it is Critters. Critters it came out after Gremlins, but it was kind of similar in that there's these little monsters terrorizing a peaceful town. So the movie starts off with like an outer space kind of clip where these mysterious prisoners are being transferred to an asteroid prison, and the species they mentioned that they are called Kruegers. They engineer an escape and commandeer a ship and leave the prison asteroid. And so the warden of the prison hires these 2 shape-shifting bounty hunters to track them down. And so they set off in pursuit of the Kruegers. And meanwhile, the Kruegers land on Earth in rural Kansas, just outside of a farm owned by the Brown family. The Browns are Jay, Helen, April, who is a teenage daughter, and then her younger brother, oh God, it starts with a B. I forget now. Anyway, he's played, the young kid, this was his first movie, and he's played by Scott Grimes, who was like on Who's the Boss, Samantha's like crush when she was just little, after they moved to Connecticut. Is it Blake? Something like that. Anyways, so basically the Critters crash land their ship, or don't crash land, they just land their ship in the field outside this farm. And during the day, it's just a normal Brown family day. The kids are terrorizing each other. The dad's just trying to get work done around the farm, and the mom's trying to keep the household running and get them off to school and such. Later that day, April returns with her boyfriend Steve in his Porsche. He's a New York city boy, and they have dinner together. Afterwards, April and Steve go out to the barn and start making out, and that's when the ship lands, and the Critters go about starting to terrorize the family farm. And the Browns try and escape, but the Critters are Krites, but they call them Critters, are smart because they pop the tires on their car so they can't go anywhere. They chew the phone line so they can't call anybody. And while all of this is happening, the bounty hunters finally catch up. They land and they start going through town trying to track the Krites down. And so all of a sudden the police station is getting all these reports of these 2 strange futuristic looking dudes tearing up the bowling alley and the church and such. And so the action all culminates on the Brown farm when the bounty hunters catch up, and the Brown family is trying to escape but also putting up a fight against the Critters. And so it all ends in this kind of explosive finale at the farm that sees a lot of destruction going on. So Siskel and Ebert gave it 2 thumbs up way back in the day, which is not what I would have thought of for a movie like that, for those 2 to give it that. But it's fantastic, and all these years later, it's still so much fun to watch it. It's crazy. Highly recommend it. And I can't find, I guess I knew there was a sequel. There was a Critters 2, but apparently there's a couple of extra sequels, maybe even 3, but I can't seem to find them anywhere, so I'm going to keep searching. And I know I saw Critters 2 for sure. I can't remember it all that well, but I know I saw that one, but I don't think I had any idea, voice cracked, I'm 43, that the other few existed at all. So that'll be, if I can ever track them down, it'll be fun to watch those ones as well. Next up, perhaps my favorite horror movie of all time, and definitely favorite franchise, 1984's A Nightmare on Elm Street, directed by Wes Craven. This movie brought in one of the most iconic horror characters of all time in Freddy Krueger. If there's people out there who don't know who he is, then they seriously need to evaluate their life choices. This film was produced in 1984, and it takes place in the year 1981 in a fictional town in Ohio, and it revolves around 4 teenage friends, I guess you could call them, who live on the same street. And one of them, Tina, she starts having these super terrorizing nightmares about this burnt fellow with a kind of a fedora hat and a red and green striped sweater, and worst of all, he has on his right hand this set of like knives. It's a glove with knives on the end, and he's been terrorizing her in her dreams. And one night when it gets really bad, she wakes up, and she even has 4 slices from his knife hands across her nightgown. And so she's like, what the hell is going on? So then the next night she has her friend Nancy over, Nancy's boyfriend Glenn, and then eventually Tina's on and off again boyfriend Rod shows up for a good time. And she just has her friends there because her mom's out of town, and she doesn't want to sleep alone because these nightmares are getting insane. That night after she falls asleep, Freddy, this burnt man, visits her in her dreams once more, and this time she doesn't survive. And Rod's watching it all unfold in the bedroom. It seems as though an invisible man is tearing Tina to bits, and there's nothing he can really do about it because he can't believe his eyes. So then he's the suspect for this murder. Nancy and Glenn are like, what the hell? And then as after Tina's death, now Nancy starts having the dreams about this man. And as she has the dream, she finds ways to wake herself up. Like she burns her arm on a pipe in a boiler room right as Freddy's about to get her to wake her up and bring her out of it. And as she goes through these nightmares, she starts to learn that, piece together that this dude can, like Rod did not kill Tina. It's this guy actually in your dreams who can kill you in your sleep, and you're actually dead in real life. So she tries to not sleep. She tries to get Glenn to experiment on trying to bring Freddy out of her dreams to try and confront him or do whatever. And as all this goes along, Rod gets killed. Glenn eventually gets killed. And then Nancy's kind of left on her own with an alcoholic mother who won't believe her about anything. Her father, the sheriff, Don, he doesn't believe her either. So she's kind of all alone against this nightmare person who is not just a nightmare. He's real. So when she eventually describes Freddy's nature to her mom finally relents and tells Nancy the truth. Freddy Krueger was a guy in their neighborhood who was a pedophile and a child murderer, and when he got off on his trial because of a search warrant that wasn't completed properly, he got away scot-free. And so the parents in the neighborhood confronted him and then ended up burning him inside of a boiler room, burned him alive and killed him. So not that it makes any sense to Nancy or anybody else, but now she knows what she's up against. And so she stages one final confrontation where she wants her dad to be there at a certain time because she's going into her nightmare and she's going to bring Freddy out, and they're going to bust him. So the final battle all takes place within her house, and it's a pretty fierce sequence of events that the 80s movies always had these nice sequences at the end of the movie when everything kind of climaxed, and it was this kind of build up to the final battle. Lost Boys was a great one. This one is a great one. Critters is a really good one as well. It's kind of a lost art in movies, that the whole 80s format was just, I love it. And this one has it in spades and is easily the best horror franchise, in my opinion, of all time. And I love the original, of course, but there's tons of them. I think there's 6 of the original run, so it's hard to pick a favorite. Sometimes it's easiest to go with the original, but there's some other really good ones too. So consider me undecided on my favorite actual movie from the franchise, but easily the best horror franchise. Next up, and this one's a little more off the board in terms of an 80s movie, because it's got an element of romance to it as well, which as a kid I didn't really care for, and even now I don't really care for. What is love anyways? But this one, as a kid, the adventure involved in it really, really grabbed me. And the movie, from 1984 as well, is called Romancing the Stone. Starring Michael Baldwin and Kathleen Turner, this movie's about a romance novelist named Jane Wilder who is just starting to hit her stride. She's published a bunch of books. She's starting to get really successful. And unfortunately, she has a sister named Elaine who's down in Colombia, and she's got mixed up in some shady stuff. Elaine's husband, who is Colombian, has been found murdered, and Jane just in the mail receives a package from him that she doesn't open, but eventually, soon enough, she comes home to her apartment and it's been rifled through, so she knows something is up. And then her sister Elaine calls her from Cartagena and says, Jane, you got to get down here and bring the package that, I forget her ex-husband's name or whatever, but whoever, bring the package that he sent you, because these two guys have me kidnapped, and they're going to kill me if you don't bring the map. So the two kidnappers are Ralph and Ida. I believe they're cousins. Ida is played by Danny DeVito, so that's another great actor in the movie that makes it even better. And so Jane then has to fly to Colombia, put everything on her life on hold, fly to Colombia with this package, which is actually a treasure map, and go down there to rescue her sister. Now, after she gets there and gets off the airplane in the airport, she's trying to decide which bus to get on, and some shady guy that you see earlier in the movie who was scoping out her apartment informs her to get on one bus, and it's not the right bus, and the bus crashes later, and he tries to extort the map from her at gunpoint, but then just by happenstance, another American that's in the region stumbles upon the scene and ends up getting into a gunfight with this fellow and chases him off. So then Jane, out in the middle of nowhere in the Colombian jungle, with nothing but high heels and dresses and such on her person, hires this fellow who ends up, his name is Jack Colton, to kind of guide her to the nearest city that has, or town that has a phone, so she can get in touch with the kidnappers. So then he seems to be more of a, no, you're on your own, baby, I'm in this for me sort of thing. But eventually she agrees to pay him almost $400, and he relents, and soon enough he figures out what she's doing, and they get into this adventure. This guy that he was in the gunfight with earlier shows up with all of his army forces, and it just turns into this kind of romp, an adventure through the jungle of Colombia, for them to either they eventually decide to actually go for the treasure and have more of a bargaining chip to get Jane's sister back, rather than just going and handing over the map, and who knows what's going to happen, right? So it's just this chase through the jungle, classic 80s action adventure movie, as Jane and Jack try to get Elaine free and safe. So, and of course, along the way, Jane and Jack develop a bit of a romantic relationship and such, and it's tested, of course, in different ways, but in the end, everything works out just nicely, right? So there is a sequel to this that I will hopefully be watching with James soon, because I haven't watched these two movies in a long time, so it's always fun to go back and watch them every once in a while. But yeah, so another classic 80s, not a horror movie like the other two, but one of those typical 80s action adventure kind of movies. Last up is a couple of video games. First up, just recently finished Super Smash Bros. Ultimate for the Nintendo Switch. If you don't know the Smash Brothers franchise, it started way back on either, I don't know if it was on the Super Nintendo or if it started on the N64, but basically it's kind of like a street fighting game, but it involves characters from all over video game-dom. and not just characters you would expect to be fighters, but there's like Kirby, Yoshi, the Mario Brothers, Sonic the Hedgehog, Animal Crossing, Metroid, Star Fox, F-Zero. There's tons of franchises. Donkey Kong. There's tons of franchises that lend their characters to this mix, and they of course all have their different abilities and moves and stuff. And so basically, you just take your character of choice into battle against your opponents, and you can pick stages again from all these different types of games that are influenced by them and inspired by them. And some of them are pretty basic. Some of them have like environmental elements that you can exploit to do damage to your opponents, and also of course get damaged by if they're used against you. And yeah, you want to be the last man standing and beat everybody down. Now, there's different modes you can go through. There's like tournament fights, so yeah, you can take in a roster of fighters, and when the first guy's defeated, you move on to the next, so it's the first whose cachet is exhausted is the loser sort of thing, and other variations on the fights as well. You can fight in teams. So if you want to fight with your friend against random enemies, you can do that. Or if you want to fight against each other, you can do that too. But I've only played one Smash Brothers game before this, which was the one on the Wii U. I forget what it was called. It didn't really have a story mode or anything, so it's just like Street Fighter. It's like once you've played through a number of matches, it's like, okay, I'm done with this. It's kind of boring, right? But in this game, they added this spirit mode, which is kind of like a story mode. So basically, there's this weird-looking enemy named Galeem who swoops in, and all the fighters in the game, he converts them into like these kind of zombies that are controlled by spirits, and they're all working against you now. You're the lone survivor, and you control Kirby. So you're presented with this huge map that you have to work through, and there are about 700 plus fights that you can partake in as you move across this map. Different areas of the map will become available to you once you complete other areas, depending on which routes you choose. And there's different areas of the map that are kind of themed with different games. Like there's kind of like a Link or Legend of Zelda zone where you'll face the theme of the land will be that, and you'll face more of the characters from that franchise and such. An F-Zero zone, there's a castle with Bowser in it, like there's all these different zones that you can go to. And so each kind of area of the map also has its ultimate boss. So it's not just a regular fight, it's a fight against a much bigger character that's a little harder to take down than the regular fights. And as you beat these fights, you gain the spirit that's controlling the fighter you fight against. And then these spirits have different abilities that will lend you like lava floor immunity or a faster smash attack charge and stuff like that. So you can switch these spirits around before each fight to compensate for what might be going on in that fight that's going to cause you a problem, right? So, and it's just as the more fights you beat, the more and more you go along, the more experience you gain, the more spirits you have, and the more you can put them to use in different situations. And it all culminates in a fight against Galeem and another mysterious kind of head enemy that is the final fight to beat the game. So like I said, there's over 700 fights you have to partake in this mode. So it's not just like when you first look at the map, it looks big, but it's like, oh, okay, well, it won't take me that long. But there's almost maps within maps and stuff, right? So it takes a lot longer than it looks like it's going to, but that's okay because it's one of those games where it's like, okay, it's like midnight right now, and I've been playing for 2 hours already, and I just want to get one more fight done. And then it's like, okay, one more fight, because they don't take long, right? They only take a minute, unless you lose and you have to constantly redo it, which does happen throughout as you kind of are lacking in abilities and you need to gain more to beat a certain fight. But yeah, it's just got that addictive quality to it where you just want to go, okay, one more. So I was at the point where I was at the end of the game, and I was just like, one day I was just like, I'm doing the whole thing today because I just need this to be done. Not because I hate it or it's boring or whatever, but just because I can't afford to keep this addiction going any more than I already have. It's making me crazy, right? So super fun game, but like all Nintendo games on the Switch that are in the Nintendo realm, like Mario, Kirby, Yoshi, Donkey Kong, whatever, I'm not sure it's ever going to be less than $80. So, well, actually I got that for $60 on sale at Christmas time or whatever, but it's one of those ones that hardly ever comes down on price unless it's some sort of a super sale going on. So last up was a PS1 game I picked up at Game Cycle probably last summer, and for the PS1, and I liked the cover of it. It looked really interesting, and it is called Eliminator. It didn't end up being that great. Not because I'll give you the premise first. It takes place in outer space on this planet that's a prison planet, and the only way people can ever escape is if they are chosen to partake in this kind of arena vehicle combat contest, and you have to battle your way through 5 kind of arenas to gain your freedom. Now the vehicles in it are kind of like these hover ships that have blasters attached, and then as you go through you can gain secondary weapons that are like missiles or mines or whatever. And so there's 5 different worlds. I think I didn't get to the end because it's just way too hard. That's my main knock on the game. It's just insanely hard. But there's 5 different areas, I believe, and each area consists of potentially 3 levels. You go through the arena part in the first round, where you have a time limit, and you have to or else your ship blows up automatically. You have to find your way through the arena and confront all the enemies, and just find your way through and get to the end. If you do well enough or earn some sort of a bonus during that, you get a second level that's like a bonus level that can get you extra points and such. And then the third level is always the boss level, where you take on the whatever kind of machine they're throwing your way that you have to take down. And so you get through all five of these worlds, and then you gain your freedom. The graphics for the time, they look like they would have been pretty good. The gameplay is really good. I like the way the ship's controls. It could be a little slower because sometimes it's way too fast and you're trying to strafe and stuff and you're just moving too fast. If they'd slowed that down a bit, it might have been a little better. But the only real knock I have on it is just the insane difficulty level. I was playing through the first world. Maybe I got through the first world, and no, maybe not. It was at best it was the second world, but it may have even been the first. But I was trying to play through it, and I just like, it's so easy to get killed in this game, and you got to make it. There's no save points or anything. It's like when you get killed, you're starting from the start all over again, and it's just too easy to get hit in this game. And so I've even found a cheat online that gives you like invulnerability all the way through the game, and I still couldn't get through. It was just insane. And it wasn't because I couldn't defeat the boss, but sometimes you can't get through the level within the time limit, or you get to an area where like there's these disappearing platforms that you only have a really narrow margin of opportunity to get across them, and then you have to shoot these moving targets, and you literally have like 3 seconds to hit the target. So if you're not oriented right, or if you are but you're just a little off and your shots don't hit, you just plummet down into doom, and you're starting the thing all over again. So I got to the fourth world, and I went through the arena section of it numerous times and almost got to the end, but I got to those platforms, and just one night I tried it like 5 times in a row and got to that same spot and just couldn't get through. And it was just like, you know what, I'm done. Even with this cheat code, I can't get this goddamn game done. So it was like, I'm done. It's over. I'm not wasting any more time on this. I've got other games that I'm actually probably going to beat and will be more fun than this. So let's just call this one a loss, and we'll move on from there, right? Like I said, looks great, plays great for its era, but just way, way, way too hard. So, and I'm not one to back down from a challenge, but sometimes you just know when you're beat. You know when a game has presented something so ridiculous to you that it's like, whatever, you know. This will not wound my pride to give up on this. So anyways, that's the 5 things we've been up to lately. I will be back with more soon enough, as you know, because I got nothing better to do. So until then, enjoy what is now becoming another sunny day. So long.